Welcome to Trench Diaries. This is Blood, Dust and Snow, chapter 27. January the 24th, 1943, Sunday. We are rolling. Yes, in contrast to all the rumors of the past weeks, we are now going to Germany. We are sitting in leave train 844 from Stalino to Brest-Litovsk, and I have a whole bench to myself. I can stretch my legs out, and I have placed my briefcase on my lap, where it forms a sturdy surface to write on. That way, I am able to write a few lines about my recent adventures. Yesterday, we had to wait for a long time before anything happened. There was enough time to eat lunch, which consisted of bean soup with meat, also known as radio soup, as it will make itself heard in 2 hours, or special announcement soup, because those who manage to find a piece of meat have to make a special announcement. At 1300 hours, we were shifted into the drafty hallway, where I called for the head physician. The poor man is in a very bad state because he's slowly turning blind. His face is getting fatter and fatter from doing absolutely nothing, and is now slowly growing over his eyes. Once we arrived, I sent him to fetch the paymaster to talk about the bad provisions. When the paymaster had turned up, a debate was held right in the middle of the hallway, surrounded by grinning lancers. That had a good effect. He disappeared with his tail between his legs and promised to sort out some extra rations for the journey. A coach took us from the hospital to Stalino into a soldier's home, where he arrived after 4 hours. It had taken us 4 hours to travel 12 kilometers across the icy snow-covered roads. In the previous years, the Russians have built lots of enormous multi-story buildings. I don't see them in the negative light in which they are described in the Goebbels press. I see them as warning signs of a major threat, the dangers formed by the emergent Soviet bourgeois. One day, the Russians will have all the things that we have, but their workers will live better and in more modern surroundings than the workers in the fascists and libertarian states. And what will happen then? Anyway, I really need to stop thinking that way. But we in the West need to keep our eyes open, and the Russian bear has awoken from centuries of hibernation. We need to listen. By talking to the Russians, I have learned a lot. There is a new Soviet intelligentsia, a class surging to the top from the lowest level of society, and it does so at breakneck speed and on a wide front. It won't be long until it doesn't require a teacher anymore. But anyway, I have distracted myself again. In the soldiers' home, where we lay on straw sacks until 1900, I met several old comrades from the division, riflemen of the 114th and K6. Some of them remembered me well, and our eyes started to glow when we talked about past and recent battles. One of them had ridden on my tank at Muratovo, and another remembered how I had finished off that 52-ton tank. Krakow lay next to me and listened to us talking. And then the subject changed to our most recent losses, and I found myself shocked. Kelletat has fallen, Jung has fallen, Hauptmann Jonas, Graf Plettenberg, too many to list them all, but among them were Stöcker, Zollenkopf's adjutant, and Feige, the admiral's son, recently serving in the 16th Panzer Division. All of them have fallen. Oberleutnant Schneider has lost an arm, and Wissenmann has fallen as well. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't. Should we win, then this victory has come at a high price. Again, the best within our ranks have fallen. They also told me that Comrade Scheibert has won the Knight's Cross. I'm sure he deserved it. We quickly got tired and slept for a while, until a man brought the news that a coach was waiting outside to take us to the station. At 2100 hours, we sat in the train. Together with the other officers, I am now sitting in an old third-class express wagon, which offers enough room for us and the huge piles of luggage. The benches are short, but I can stretch my legs across the aisle in the middle of the wagon. This is not too difficult with my plaster cast, and I rest the left leg on one of Krakow's crutches. Still more comfortable than in the turret of a Skoda tank. From Stalino, the journey took us to Jasinovataya, from where we continued on the German-made main railway line via Konstantinovka to Slaviansk. At the moment, we are rolling towards Lozovaya, and it will be probably dark when we arrive there. In Slaviansk, we've drawn rations and were given a bowl of special announcement noodle soup each. If things don't get worse, the journey will be quite bearable. Here in the cabin, which makes up half of the total space in the wagon, we also have a pot-belly stove, and during our last stop, some comrades have stolen some coal for it. When the wind is coming from the wrong direction, as it is now, the thing smokes quite infernally. But who cares? As the old saying goes, many have frozen to death, but no one has ever died from stench. Earlier today, when temperatures had risen slightly outside, the steam heating kicked in. Now, however, it has switched itself off again. We are going north. January the 25th, 1943, Monday. I slept well the previous night. It was almost too warm under the large pile of blankets. Bright sunshine outside, clear blue sky. But it is cold. The snow crunches under the feet of the women and prisoners of war who are shoveling snow on the station platform. Lieutenant Krakow has just prepared himself a wonderful meal using a big onion. We used to do the same, but being old veterans of Russia, we had quickly given up on using this ingredient when even the Russians started airing their rooms to get rid of the terrible smell brought on by the consumption of onion. Everyone is winding up Krakow now, telling him that he will soon stink like a Jew. The train is making slow progress. At the moment, we are stationary again. For what reason, no one knows. At the front, there are 2 locomotives and another one is at the back of the train. That only arrived last night after we got stuck on a hill. The doctor, Krakow and Flamme are playing skat. Some officers from another wagon have come over to watch them play. There is a Hauptmann and commander of an armored train unit here as well. At Chernishkov, he was in command of 2 trains. I've taken photographs of one of them. His trains had then been attached to Gruppe Stahel, and now he was delighted to hear that Stahel, Oberst and Kampfgruppe leader in a Luftwaffe field unit, had been decorated with the oak leaves to the Knight's Cross. I had read that in a newspaper while I was still in hospital. The same newspaper, of January the 3rd or 4th, which had the Wehrmachtsbericht mentioning our 6th Panzer Division in it. This, by the way, is only due to the merits of Major Bäke and the engagement where the 37 Russian tanks were annihilated. I will surely learn more about everything that happened there once I am back with the Ersatzabteilung. I have to admit that it hit me quite severely to learn about the number of officers killed in Schützenregiment 114 and K6. By now, nearly all the old brothers in arms of the first campaign in Russia have either fallen or been wounded so badly that they are not fit for duty anymore. In our army, the relation of men at the front to men behind the lines is supposed to be 1 to 8. So 8 men serve in supporting roles to keep 1 fighting man in the trenches. We are told that in the Russian army, where the pool of available manpower is much larger than ours anyway, that ratio is 1 to 4. The Reds don't require such a massive overhead organization. The Russians have enormous human resources, and we allow our shirkers to serve behind the lines. 0900. We are still not in Poltava. We are currently rolling through the first proper forest I have seen in ages. This makes me rather happy because it is a clear sign that we are moving further north and closer towards Germany. 1000 hours. We are standing on Poltava station. Lots of people are walking past our window. All of them have some duty here on the station. A proper mix of people and races. Italians, Turkmens, Uzbeks, Ukrainians, Slovaks, Romanians, all of them brothers in arms. We've just had our photo taken with the kind assistance of an Italian comrade. He was an Alpini, Italian mountain infantry, and I have to say that their kit isn't any worse than ours. There are lots of different uniforms to see here, including those of the OT, the Reichsbahn, and of the Red Army, rows of prisoners of war who are waiting to be transported into camps. It can't be much more colorful in the camps of the English and the Americans, only that the English have millions of Indians which they can force into their service. We should raise our own auxiliary formations from Russian volunteers. With those, we could then defend the coasts of France and thus release several German divisions for service here in the east. And in France, they could not defect to Belov's partisans either. I would really like to command such a Ukrainian or Russian contingent. They'd certainly be of more use than a German furlough battalion. There are lots of Ukrainian militia at the station. All young, strong and healthy lads. Why use them here on station duty? That's a job for our old daddies of the Landesschützen. Why should they serve in France committing adultery with the French ladies? And what about all our divisions guarding the Channel coast, like 302, 304 and 306? They would be good for service in Russia. Again, I can't fail to notice that the Russian women are employed on hard physical labor duties. The railway employs entire working columns consisting of only females, heaving sacks of coal, shoveling snow and sawing wood. They are wrapped in thick kilted jackets, wear fur caps and head shawls, and around their arms cuff bands which read Deutsche Reichsbahn. We have a whole lot of Red Cross nurses here on our train. They are far better equipped now than they were at the beginning of the war in Russia. Now they all have thick felt boots, fur caps and vests, kilted jackets and ski trousers. Our henhouse here originates mainly from southern Germany. January the 26th, 1943, Tuesday. We are standing in a goods yard and a few police officers have got on board. We, and the Hauptmann in particular, are now taking the piss out of them. With their fat asses they are sitting here telling us that they are on the way to the front. The front of these fatties, however, will be about 30 kilometers behind the actual front, in the best possible case. I'm getting sick of these people, indeed. The tantalizing smell of toasted bread is wafting through the train. This is a thing which has become very popular here in the East, where bread is usually either moldy or frozen. Because of that, the Lancers have started toasting the bread on oven plates and the like until the slices are dark brown and crispy. Any moldy taste has dissipated after the treatment, and that it also thaws, well, that doesn't need to be pointed out. There is a lot of traffic here on the station. We are drawing supplies, and that is why we have to wait for such a long time. On the track next to ours there is a train full of comrades of SS Division Das Reich. They are already disembarking here in the area of Kiev. There are also some hospital trains at the station. They can move much more quickly than we do, as they can prepare the food themselves and only need to halt for a locomotive change. I wish I could travel on one of them. It would get me home much quicker. Lieutenant Krakow has turned out to be a hysterical and quarrelsome man, not a person I could be around for longer periods of time. His entire lack of self-control is really getting on my nerves. The doctor, however, is a well-educated and calm character, just like Lieutenant Flamme, who, even though he is only 20 years old and sometimes a little phlegmatic, turns out to be great company. Our caretaker, an OT man from Hanover, is a complete idiot, totally useless. Again, he has failed to find us any food. Alternatively, he fails to find a coffee kitchen or, if he finds it, allows some Lancers to snatch the last coffee away. He is a painter by trade, and I am sure he could even make our old man lose his patience. A train of the SS loaded with a cargo of WWII Schwimmwagen is rolling through at the moment. We have seen a lot of those in France during exercises. How long will it take until there's nothing left of these vehicles, I wonder? Things are lost quickly here in the East. I am wondering why we are making such slow progress. We've been on the rails for 3 days now and only just reached Kiev. By now, we should have been in Brest. God knows when we'll arrive in Germany. January the 27th, 1943, Wednesday. The train is now racing towards the old Russian border with great speed. Dense forest on both sides of the line, our eyes are tired from looking outside into the white, snow-covered landscape. Now the sun has disappeared below the horizon, and now it is clear that we are approaching the west. It is 1600 hours, but still not entirely dark. The 3 other gentlemen are playing cards. The train is going so fast that it is hard to ride. We halt on what was once Polish territory, and one can see the difference between Eastern and Central Europe here. Suddenly, the houses have straight walls and are built of stone. The fields are looking good and placed in a logical manner. Even the forests are looking more tamed than those on the eastern side. January the 28th, 1943. Arrived at Brest station at 5 p.m. and after we had handed over our luggage, we and all our things were sent for delousing. The officers were deloused in a delousing train in the station. The delousing of these men was finished far more quickly, as they didn't have as many special requests as the officers. I was part of the second group which, stark naked, was waiting in one of the wagons. With us sat an Oberst of the Pioneers and the old Hauptmann Dressler. It reminded me of the advice we used to give to the recruits to just imagine their Oberst being stark naked if they were too nervous when facing such a high-ranking officer. That is what I had to think about while we were sitting there naked and without any sign of rank. I then had the idea of removing my plaster cast with the excuse that I had discovered lice beneath it. That was a lot of work, and while I managed to remove the plaster around the thigh and calf, that around my foot was too thick and sturdy. I then soaked the plaster under the shower, and I was pleased as punch when I noticed that I could walk without it. Even better than the doctor and Lieutenant Krakow, who don't even have such a dressing. January the 29th, 1943. It is a wonderful morning. Sun is shining, I have slept well and had breakfast, and while I sit in the clean communal room of the collection point and write, we are all listening to the radio which is standing on a shelf on the wall. It feels like we have peace. This morning I shaved off my beard. February the 6th, 1943. Saturday. Osnabrück. After a long journey, I have now arrived in the reserve hospital in Haste, the former St. Angela Hospital. In Brest, I couldn't write anymore. We were examined by a doctor, and then our entire group was brought to the station, where there was a train waiting for us. It was always a hell of a lot of work to load up all the officers' luggage. I could easily carry all my things myself because I only had my saber, a few blankets, my dispatch case, and my black briefcase. Krakow, the doctor, and Flamme always require some additional men to carry their things and help loading. And in Brest, that needed to be done twice. The hospital is housed in the former Polish army barracks, and that has got its own railway connection, and it was from there that a train brought us back to the main station in Brest, where luggage had to be loaded onto the other train. From Brest, we traveled in a second-class wagon to Frankfurt. As usual, I rested my legs on Krakow's crutches, which made for comfortable sitting. The train was heated nicely. Our train was supposed to carry only wounded personnel from the Eastern Front, but in Brest, a major of the local field post service climbed on board. We tried our best to kick him out again. The medic Unteroffizier, supported by murmured approval of the officers on board, applied all kinds of polite and impolite measures to steer him out of the door. But then the train guard intervened and allowed the major, who has some kind of important passport, to stay on board. We tried to ignore the old officer with his billiard ball-shaped head. In Frankfurt-Oder we arrived on the morning of January the 30th, just at the time when the civilian workers came into the city and suddenly found ourselves with our straw shoes, fur caps, overcoats and luggage surrounded by a mass of workers. They stared at us like we were the apes in Hagenbeck Zoo. A man shouted, "The poor soldiers!" We would have liked nothing better than to punch them all in the face. In the medical collection point, which was housed in an old grammar school, I didn't get into the same room as Krakow and the doctor. I had been standing outside to guard the luggage, and when I came in, the first floor was already full. I didn't want to stay in the Mark Brandenburg, and after spying around a little, I learned that there was a train leaving for Cologne in the evening. With a few gifted cigarettes, I secured a place on the reservation list. After lunch, I went into the town accompanied by the Oberst of the Pioneers. The goal was to ring home and to do a little shopping. I urgently needed a stick now because in Germany I could not use my saber as a walking stick anymore. In a cafe, we listened to a speech by Hermann Göring on the radio. I had very mixed feelings about the whole Stalingrad business. We then obtained a couple of walking sticks, made our telephone calls, and then limped back to the grammar school from where, after a massive dinner with lots of German beer, I was transported to the station again. When the train reached Flotow on the Weser, I talked to the Stabsarzt, asking him to register me as unfit for transport when we reached Bielefeld. He understood why that was necessary and gave me a referral for Bielefeld Hospital. A medic was to help me out of the train, where he was to call the hospital for me, announcing my imminent arrival. Yet the train only halted at the platform for a couple of minutes, then the whistle sounded and it pulled out again so quickly that the medic only just managed to jump back on board. He didn't have the time to call the hospital. I was lucky. I went to the local command where I received the train ticket to Paderborn and, after a nice journey, arrived at Paderborn station on January the 31st, from where I made a call and soon a car pulled up which took me into town where I had dinner with a few lieutenants of the regiment. After such a long time it was very interesting to be in the old city of Paderborn again, a visit which revived many old memories. On Monday I reported to Saalbach and spent the rest of the morning with Funk, who is now Saalbach's adjutant. Chubby Lothar Herberts, who had also just been discharged from hospital, joined us, as did old Wilhelm Lope. After lunch, where we were joined by a Herr Lange from Osnabrück, we went into Funk's room, where we four emptied 2 bottles of Steinhager and another 2 of Italian vermouth. I later went out to fetch my coat. Funk had gone back into Saalbach's office, while Lope and Herberts continued boozing. We had all agreed to go out together in the evening to have dinner and a few more drinks in Horn. Funk came to meet me, and together we went back to Lope's office, where we found him, stinking drunk and gasping for air, lying in a large pool of vomit. Fatso Herberts was nowhere to be seen. He was probably lying unconscious in some gutter. We decided not to go out after all, and I went to bed early. At 5 a.m. I took the train to Osnabrück. I was picked up from the station by Ernst, who at first didn't recognize me with my fur cap and a thick overcoat. He had brought a car with him, which brought us home in no time. In the evening, we had canned peaches. Now I am in a reserve hospital in Haste in an officer's room together with a few warriors of the Heimatfront. Food is excellent. I have now learned that taking the plaster cast off wasn't a good idea, as I am now suffering from periostitis, which means I have to stay in bed. Today, Sister Vitalis, a nun from Paderborn, but acting like a butcher's wife, squeezed out an ulcer which had formed next to the wound. The bloody pus squirting from it soiled the entire bed, and when she tried to empty the ulcer further, she accidentally rammed one of her fingers into the open wound. The pain was so bad that I nearly fainted. But at least I got rid of that blighter of an ulcer and received a new Rivanol dressing. That will surely get rid of the inflammation. The radio is playing, and I am waiting for visitors who do not arrive. Better catch some sleep. 1900 hours. Had dinner and visitors did arrive after all. Ernst brought me a tracksuit and a parcel from Anneliese from Naples. Without visitors, it would have been rather a boring evening. Outside in the common room, the radio is playing reports from the front made by the propaganda companies. Who listens to this nonsense? These reports are unrealistic, boring, and good for nothing, at least for a frontline soldier. February the 7th, 1943, Sunday. Sundays are always the most boring days of the week. In addition, I have a mighty headache. The doctor saw me earlier and told me that it could well take 2 months until I am back on my feet. It's hard not to despair. If it wasn't for the excellent food and care we are getting here, I would already have deserted back to the replacement unit. There, at least, the comrades would offer me entertainment, and I would get all the news of the regiment. In other news, today at 15:30 hours, Ruth gave birth to our son. He shall be named Wilhelm. He weighs 3,500 grams, measures 54 centimeters, blonde hair, blue eyes. He is entirely healthy. February the 11th, 1943, Thursday. So, I am now a proud father. Last Tuesday, I visited Ruth and had a first look at our son. He is a feisty little lad. Sadly, I didn't feel too well after having received the Eubasin shot against the inflammation. Dr. Utmüller took me with him in his car and also brought me back to hospital afterwards. By now, I am fine again, better than I have been for days. Since the plaster has come off, my leg has become a lot thinner. And due to the inflamed wound, it is very hard to stand up. It will be a long time before the leg is back to what it once looked like. February the 15th, 1943, Monday. 1 year ago today, Ruth and I were in Hamburg at a public talk about eternal peace after the 9 Years' War. That was on a Sunday, and afterwards we went to a concert in the Conventgarten. And now we are a small family and our boy is sleeping in his basket. In the meantime, I've been fighting in Russia again, and now I am in hospital with a shot-up leg. Yesterday, mother and father came from Hamburg to visit me. I'm feeling quite good. The hole in my leg has shrunk a little and the pus is pushing little bone splinters out of the wound. I've been getting massages for a few days now and hot air baths beneath a red light box. I still think that exercise would be more useful to build my leg up again than these artificial measures. What really ails me is a constant headache. I don't know when I will be able to get rid of this side effect of war, because that is what it seems to be. I have seen Stabsarzt Dr. Dörflein, the ear, nose and throat specialist, and he told me that this is a common side effect of combat stress, physical weakness due to the wound, and also of the numerous concussions of my brain. February 19th, 1943, Friday. The Stabsarzt and I have been in town to see a film at the cinema. We watched Wen die Götter lieben, a film about Mozart. When we walked to the Capitol, I met a few old friends from my time in the Hitler Youth, all of whom are now in the army. Many of our age group have fallen, and after the war they will leave a huge gap in our ranks. Many have been severely wounded, have become cripples, and I can only hope that fate will grant us victory so that we'll be able to take proper care of these comrades. I have to admit that the news that Rostov and Charkov have been evacuated doesn't furnish me with lots of hope that this is actually going to happen. But now, after listening to the latest speech of Jupp Goebbels, one at least sees that something is being done and that in the coming spring we will give the Ruskies a proper beating. But that is still a long way off. I've seen and done enough at Stalingrad. We have to stand fast, survive, and do everything to turn this critical situation around. Later, I went to the KMT, the former Alsberg department store. It has been completely bombed out, and now there are inmates of a concentration camp cleaning up the debris. Looking at their faces, they are Slavs, Russians or Poles, maybe also some Czechs. The Russians have the same numb facial expressions as the Russian prisoners of war at the front. The houses everywhere have been much damaged by bombing, and there are large numbers of foreign workers in chocolate-brown uniforms, Dutch and Flemish workers, serving in labor battalions and tasked to rebuild and repair the damage. All of them are strong young men in their prime, the same age group which here in Germany has been sent to fight at the front. There was also a large group of female Ukrainian laborers. With their simple clothing and the typical headscarves, they formed a stark contrast to the more elegant local women. But they work well and hard, and there are never any complaints about them. In general, the Russian women are used to hard work much harder than the women here could ever imagine. The Russian women wear a patch on their sleeves, similar to the P of the Poles. It is a purple square with the letters OST stitched onto it. They are also known as Ostarbeiterinnen, and in many cases the NSV has supplied them with clothing which makes them look quite presentable. Goebbels recently gave a public speech in the Berlin Sportpalast in which he asked the German people to continue to stand behind the Führer and to bear the increased burden resulting from total war. We soldiers now know that the coming summer will see the continuation of German blows against the Russians, and that even those who have so far been deferred from military service will be drafted in. We see dozens of these people in hospital every day when they come in to be examined for some small ailment. Between now and the coming summer, we can make useful soldiers out of them, and that should also be enough time to produce enough weapons and equipment to launch a new offensive. During this winter, the Eastern Front has again swallowed a great number of divisions, and we will not be able to get over the loss of the entire 6th Army anytime soon. The comrades who were lost in Stalingrad were, in the majority, of best Westphalian and Rhenish blood. In the coming summer, one man will have to fight for two to be able to avenge them. March the 1st, 1943, Monday. Having spent the weekend at home with my wife and child, I now know that I have become too used to being at war. The peace and quiet at home isn't good for me, so this morning, as quickly as I could, I fled back into my hospital room. Here in the army, surrounded by my comrades, is my real home. Here I am not only tolerated, but I have an actual raison d'être. I can breathe freely again. I'm free to do what I want and also manage to regain some kind of inner calm. I would like to know how many others feel as if they have lost their place at home after so many years of service, or if I am just a misfit. Yesterday I had a phone call with Herbert in Hamburg. His Luftwaffe school has been evacuated from the Kerch Peninsula back into the Reich, where it has been disbanded. Herbert will be transferred to the flying personnel or some Luftwaffe infantry unit in Russia. For the moment, his unit is in Fürstenwalde, so Herbert's first stint in Russia didn't last very long. Who knows if he's even getting back there now? In the Luftwaffe, anything is possible. If my headache doesn't get better anytime soon, I will ask to be sent to a spa. I am so sick of this old woman's ailment. And that they prescribed me a pair of reading glasses makes it even worse. even though I have to admit that they do help a little. If I then consider my emerging baldness, I can't deny that I am on the best route to turning into an old man, the result of 6 years of service and war. I can put some weight on my leg again, and I hardly notice the wound anymore. I've trained hard not to show any sign of limping and to stop dragging the injured leg after me when climbing stairs. The wound is still weeping a little, but looking at the fact that the bone was broken and that only 2 months have passed since then, it is looking quite good. March the 2nd, 1943, Tuesday. While I am writing this, the sirens are wailing. Air raid warning. I won't bother getting into the cellar until I can hear that the flak battery here behind the hospital is opening up. In recent days, these alarms were mostly caused by individual aircraft and stragglers, and these are not worth running around for. Even though there are beds for everyone down there in the cellar, there are nicer places to be. And when one rolls over to get some sleep, they sound the all clear and we can climb up to the 2nd floor again. No, not with me. I'd rather sit through the alarm on my comfy bed. Yesterday, the Tommies were over Potsdam and Magdeburg, and on their way back they flew over Osnabrück. The flags started firing everywhere, so Stabsarzt Henschen and I went down into the cellar. While we were sitting there, a group of nurses came down the stairs who had been woken by the alarm. Nurse Friedel had been so terrified by the reports of the 8.8 centimeter battery on the Sonnenhügel that she had just quickly thrown on a red silk kimono, under which she wore more or less nothing. Due to that, she didn't want to come down the final flight of stairs into the brightly illuminated cellar. Someone supplied her with a blanket, which she wrapped around herself before she finally came down. Nurse Marianne had swapped her shoes, wearing her left shoe on the right foot. Everyone laughed when she stumbled through the narrow corridor. The sound of the flak battery was so loud and terrifying that many of the women were completely terrified. There was a Serbian general with us in the cellar. He had fallen sick in the camp here in Eversborg and is being treated here, as are a large number of Frenchmen who are working here in the city and as such are being decently treated. March the 9th, 1943, Tuesday. Today I had surgery on my leg. Dr. Utmüller has scraped the hardened pus off the broken bone, and now I am lying in my little bed with a splint on my leg, again dependent on the assistance of the people around me. With that, the infernal torture with shit pans and pee bottles is starting once more. My ass is hurting from lying in bed, while outside there is glorious sunny weather. I've been in town every day these past weeks. The wound had closed up, leaving only a small hole to drain it, and I could walk very well. But the bone was still infected, and below the wound a large abscess had formed. This was drained today, and they have also scraped the rest of the wound clean, taking out several old trouser scraps which had been in there since the day I was wounded. This morning I got a morphine injection which made me feel very dizzy. Then Zoller, the masseur, arrived and shaved my leg around the wound. At 9 a.m. I was lying in the operating room where they strapped me to a metal frame and injected something into my arm which made me fall asleep. When I woke up at 12:30 p.m., Nurse Irene was sitting next to me, holding my hand, and told me that I had been screaming and crying in my sleep for over an hour. Nurse Irmgard Schneider told me that in my morphine-soaked state I had told her not to be so terrified when she hears the Achtung announcing the imminent arrival of the Stabsarzt in Hall 3, which is separated from the massage room by a thin wooden wall. But, to tell the truth, she's terrified and always tries to make everything look and sound as busy as possible. When the Stabsarzt is near, we support her in every possible way. I repeatedly slap my hand on my naked thigh to make it sound like a massage is ongoing, while the comrade runs the motor of the electric shaving apparatus, repeatedly changing the cutting length by pulling and pushing a lever which makes the shaver howl like the siren of a dive bomber. In addition, we always make sure that irradiation lamps are placed next to the beds. Every effort is made to appear more busy than we actually are. Nurse Irmgard is the daughter of a very well-known and popular Osnabrück surgeon, Dr. Schneider, and we do everything in our power to assist her. I am now lying here, waiting for the air raid alarm. March 14th, 1943. I have received mail from Lieutenant Krakau, who is in hospital in Bad Polzin, his hometown. He's feeling quite well there and has 2 more comrades to play skat with. In the bed next to me, there is an army apothecary who had his appendix removed. He's getting a lot of female visitors. When Ernst came to visit later, he and the apothecary argued with me about the German population, who now, during total war, allegedly don't want to be part of it anymore because the English keep dropping bombs night after night. Many people in certain circles who hold no sympathy for Nazis now try to stir up unrest in the population, and it is they who are the problem, not the English bombs. April the 8th, 1943, Thursday. I haven't written for several weeks, but a lot has happened in that time. Today, 3 weeks ago, I received the news that I had been awarded the German Cross in gold. On Wednesday, they took another X-ray of my leg, which resulted in what I hope will be the last surgical work they do on it. This operation didn't do me well at all. I couldn't eat for the week and had to puke whenever I tried to eat something, and when they changed my bandage one evening, I suffered a complete mental breakdown. This is unfortunately the last entry of Friedrich's diary from the hospital. The diary continues in December of 1943 in the form of loose pages, quite a while after he had been released, and is now in a position of instructor. The diary continues as such. Fragments, December 1943. Undated. But now I am sitting here in Niš as an instructor for the Bulgarians, teaching them our experiences in this combat school. The school consists of 3 infantry companies, fully equipped with weapons, 1 pioneer and 1 signal company, a battery of light field howitzers, and our tank assault gun training command. This is led by Hauptmann Heimke of the Großdeutschland regiment, who has just arrived from the Reich. As the name suggests, the training command consists of 1 platoon with 5 Panzer IVs with a long 7.5 cm gun and a platoon of 5 Stuck 3 assault guns, equally armed with long 7.5 cm. I am in command of the tank platoon, while Oberleutnant Baldauf has the assault guns. Baldauf is a Swabian and from the Sturmartillerie Lehrregiment, a great comrade, and we have already established brotherhood over drink. His nickname is Balbo, and he is the most charismatic joker. The school, which is subordinated to the military attaché in Sofia, is commanded by Oberst Dr. Zimmermann, also a Swabian and an infantryman by trade. Then there is an Oberleutnant from Gilsa, artillery and tactics instructor. The infantry instructor is Knight's Cross holder Hauptmann Siegfried Weber, whose brother is a U-boat commander and also wears the Knight's Cross. Weber is a fresh and sympathetic man who also lives in the Panzerburg, into which I will also move once my predecessor Oberleutnant von Schell has moved out. Schell has lost his patience with some stupid Bulgarian Hauptmann, insulted and screamed at him for being too clumsy to serve in a tank. This led to a complaint, and the OKH has sent him back to the replacement unit. December 16th, 1943. The evening in the theater of Niš now lies behind me, and tonight I have to attend an officers' evening which the Bulgarians host in their casino. The evening in the theater, which was hosted by our combat school, wasn't very impressive. We have organized better with my old company. The only thing of note was the building itself, and I have to admit that I didn't expect to see buildings of this kind in Niš. It even had a traversable stage. The soldiers' home is, just like the theater and other public buildings, a flat-roofed construction, not popular in Germany, but certainly of great popularity in the east and southeast. And who would have thought that there would be a room with hot and cold running water, central heating, and a clean, modern furnishing in this nest of 40,000 people right in the middle of partisan territory? Yes, in Berlin I had a proper writing desk and a radio in the room, but I have quickly taken a liking to the place here, and the gypsy band playing in the communal room in the evening makes me forget that there is no radio. I usually have my dinner in the school's casino in the Hotel Grand Orient, where in the evening one can buy 2 slices of cake and a big cup of coffee for 55 pfennigs. The next day. About the Bulgarian evening, I can say that I at least had the chance to eat my fill there, and that they served an exceptionally nice Bulgarian red wine, and later an even better Serbian slightly sparkling white wine. I sat next to the translator Atev, a chemical engineer by trade, who had once studied in Germany, in Aachen to be precise. On the other side sat a Bulgarian Oberst who didn't know any German words except for Prost. The food was exceptionally nice too. First, we had an oily white bean salad with smoked ham, followed by a meatloaf with lots of paprika, pickled cabbage and potato. As a dessert, the Bulgarians served bread and cheese. Between each course, we were served a large shot of Slivovitz. Later, the Bulgarians sang several very sad but also very beautiful folk songs in their language, and it is a shame that we Germans did not reply in kind to sing some of ours for the Bulgarians. The night came to an abrupt end when the air raid siren sounded, and we all had to rush out to the bunker. All in all, however, a most successful and enjoyable evening. December the 21st, 1943. Today we conducted a live firing exercise on the range, on which the Bulgarians racked up a surprisingly good score. A small incident occurred in the morning when we found that the firing range was full of sheep. We approached the old shepherd, who wore a huge fur hat, a sheepskin jacket and breeches with leather gaiters, and tried to make him understand that he needed to get the sheep off the range. We tried to speak to him in Serbian, Bulgarian and Russian. A few men even tried to speak Polish to him. All our Bulgarian translators talked to the man in their language. That went on for at least 15 minutes, after which the shepherd started to grin and smile at us before saying, "Schafe weg, ich laufen, schnell, schnell," in German. And then he started running as fast as his old legs could carry him down the range with his huge furry dog, shouting at his sheep, "Schnell, schnell, Schafe," while one of the Bulgarian translators turned to me and said, "Oh, it seems that he speaks German too." Later that day, I asked one of the Bulgarian officers what influence Bulgaria had on the Balkans and if the Serbs would stick to the Bulgarians, fight for Tito's gangs, or if they felt like Serbs. To get an answer to that question, we pulled up next to an old man who was standing on the roadside, and our translator asked him that very question. His reply surprised us. "I feel like a German," he said. "I am a German citizen because the Germans are now masters here. The people here on the Balkans are an odd bunch." We were 3 men in an Opel Blitz lorry loaded with barrels and sacks of grain and a couple of Serbian workers. The road was so bad that we could not go very fast, and when we turned around the corner into another street, half a dozen or so Serbs jumped on the lorry to hitch a ride. The Feldwebel said that they could drive with us. Most of them would be working in German offices anyway, and they all spoke at least some German. But then we passed a large group of very dubious-looking characters standing alongside the road who bowed down deeply and lifted their heads when they saw us. We all agreed that these looked like they had a guilty conscience, and so it would be best to string them all up, just to make sure. Partisan scum. So, this is it. Unfortunately, the diary ends here as I warned you it would in the very first episode. But still, many interesting things happening in this one. First of all, it is the experience of our man back at home after enduring 2 weeks of rail travel. One highly interesting phrase was dropped during this journey. He said, while being wrapped up in blankets and sweating his butt off, that many people have frozen to death, but none have stunk to death. Which, I kid you not, is the exact same phrase I have heard back when I was in the army. It simply means that you'd rather stink from old and worn clothes or too much company in the quarters than freeze to death. Which is true, of course. Hearing this in a book like this is incredible, as quite apparently this phrase was passed on through generations of German soldiers. Anyway, our man has arrived in a German hospital, and immediately 3 things are happening. 1, he starts binge drinking. 2, he becomes a father. And 3, he has too much time to think. All of which ends with him having a nervous breakdown and stopping to write his diary. Which is a shame, really, and we continue with him training Bulgarian troops about half a year later. There, he seems his usual self again and writes about what he sees. He mentions partying with the Bulgarians, which I can pretty well imagine was awesome. He also talks about Slivovitz, which is a usually homemade plum spirit common in Southeast Europe. Now, Slivovitz is not only a spirit, it is a general ailment for literally every kind of disease. Sore throat? Slivovitz. Headache? Slivovitz. Man flu? Slivovitz. Old age? Slivovitz. I have an Albanian friend and colleague who supplies me with the stuff, and it is actually true. Whenever I feel under the weather, I start microdosing the stuff in the morning and in the evening, and it works wonders. Slivovitz generally is very high in alcohol by volume. The homemade stuff usually has 65% and more, which makes it 130 proof. Good stuff. So, this is it. The book is done, and I tried to find out what happened to our author after the war as usual. Unfortunately, there isn't much to find out, and research actually was quite hard because there are quite a few people with the same name. All we know is that he was taken prisoner by the Americans in 1945, he survived the war, and that is it. Quite unfortunate indeed. Now, let me know what you think about this book and our author's story down in the comments, and I will see you for the next adventure in the next episode. Cheers, and thank you for staying with me.